So we've got some good, interesting speakers here today. I can't see Gabby presenting, and that's good because Gabby's not well. So he may or may not join us later on. And I guess we will kick it off very shortly, like 1 more minute really. So we'll start on time, and I have to keep it on time because yeah, some of the speakers are sort of here for a brief moment to just do their presentation. So I will not go over, but I will talk to you a little bit about the agenda today. So as I said, we're expecting 91 attendees today. So thank you all for coming along. Really glad that it's coming to an end. I've been really busy, but it has been a really good forum this year. So we've had hundreds of registrations as usual, and it's been really nice to catch up with everyone and see everyone, and hopefully you've all had some information to take away back with you, and a bit of an update on where things are at. I also, on behalf of George and Gissa, acknowledge the traditional custodians and First Peoples of Australia and their continued connection to their country and culture. And we pay our respects to elders past and present and to all First Nations people. With the official stuff out coming to an end, I'd like to just talk about the agenda. So the agenda traditionally has been, we've run a series of 6 events this year. We combined 2 of the specs, S and W, and that finished last week. So this week is the showcase, and the showcase isn't necessarily about specs. It can be about specs, but it can also be general presentations of around what's happening in industry and what projects people are working on, etc. And so we hopefully we've got a great collection of speakers for you today. In terms of our speakers, we'll have Adam Beck up at 10:35, followed by Colin, Hobson and Phillip, Nell, Andrew Dowding, Christian Fellinger, Maddy, Yewers from RMIT, and Craig Sandy, who I'm assuming you all know of Craig. So a bit of a sort of overview of what's happened this year so far. Housekeeping. So if you are needing professional learning points, you get 3 CPD points for this showcase, 3 Surveyors Registration Board Victoria FPEC, and LSLB WA, you get 3 general education points. Kind of shared home office going on. If you please feel free to turn your cameras on. It's much nicer to talk to people's faces than circles with initials. But stay silent unless you. But feel free to unsilence or unmute your microphone if you have any questions you want to ask, etc. If you're dialing in on your phone and you need to take a call, please hang up from this call and then come back so that we don't end up with your hold music. So we've gone over that. So this is our 5th National Series Forum, and my name is Kelly Ireland, for those who don't know me, and I've been in the spatial industry for about 15 years, and I now do consulting back to the spatial industry around strategy, project management, promoting the industry. I've done quite a bit of work to promote the industry to school students and facilitate and manage and set up work experience programs and things like that. This QR code is to my LinkedIn profile, so please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and stay in touch and ask questions. And I also obviously do some work with George, and he's currently in Greece, so he's left the showcase in my hands this year. So hence we've run on time. We've been quite succinct. So throughout the presentations and forums this year, we have ran a series of Menti or polls and asked questions around where you're from and that sort of stuff. So this is sort of rough numbers. We get a lot of interest in D-SPEC and R-SPEC and O-SPEC and S and W we combine because that's probably not as one of the most popular specs. And B-SPEC as well. I think B-SPEC's pretty good, but for some reason it was low this year. And I guess we asked this because we're interested to see where people are coming in from. So we have people from all over Australia, Shepparton, Perth. You can see there that it's just an interesting little thing. Where are you from? And then we also ask where do you work? What do you do? And we can see here that half of our participants work for the councils, local government councils, all their contractors, surveyors, and I suspect other would be water boards, maybe utilities, that sort of stuff. But I might ask that question a bit more specifically next year. In terms of people's general knowledge of the specs, it's interesting to see, how people, different levels of knowledge, but there's still some people who are completely green, a lot of people actually, around the different specs. But that's good to know when we're presenting and we're talking about the specs, because we need to know what you know so that we don't bore you with stuff or tell you stuff you already know. So the last couple of years we've shaken it up a little bit, and instead of having George run the entire presentations, we have invited guest speakers to present, and our guest speakers are made up of community people who use A-SPEC in their business, or they capture data and turn it into and apply the specs to that data before they give it to their clients, etc. And it's been really interesting to hear some of the case studies and some of the user stories of our attendees. And because the forum is all about sharing information and collaborating, and it's with your input that we are able to shape and grow and improve the service, and also add new specs in, or change specs if they need to be sort of altered, or even just further explanation and understanding of how other people are using the specs in their business. So that's been received really well. 4.5 stars is the average rating of our guest speakers. So that's really good. We ask every forum, we ask who is providing data in the new version and who is requesting data in the new version. And the majority of respondents are not providing or requesting data in the new version, which was interesting. And I guess it's something for George to consider when he's chatting with you all about the specs and about how you're using them in the business. So that was an interesting information. We also asked, has anyone undertaken backlog capture or drainage using the existing specs? And it seems that majority have not, which is interesting. And again, that could be something that you take up with George. He's back at the end of September. It's a nice holiday. So our digital expert, our tech expert, is Gabby Van Wyck, and he has been presenting each week some of his tech tips and showing how he does certain things and is able to streamline some of the processes that he does inside of the programs that he's using. He can be connected with, or you can register. One of the things that he's brought out for the specs and for the community is the API and web app. And so the code list is now available via an API and a web app, and you can register your interest to have that set up for you with this QR code. Once you register, Gabby will be in contact with you, and I think it's relatively easy, and it makes your life pretty great because you're not going back to the list to check things. It's just all coming through. So I guess the key takeaways from the forum have been pretty consistent. Share. So share information, talk to each other, reach out use George as that person to connect with other people with similar stories or similar processes and programs, so that you can share how you're managing certain things inside your business. And so again, communication as well. So we often talk about having forums, or not so much forums, but lunch and learn catch-ups where we can pick a spec or pick a particular area of interest and have a chat with each other, hook up at lunchtime online and sort of share that information. And we hope to get through to that this year and get that set up so that people can connect better and make those networks grow and work together. Obviously, data governance and quality assurance is really important, and checklists and processes as guides. So these are all the things that support the standards and make sure that we're consistent and we're using them correctly and we're not missing really important information. We also talked about future proofing and education, yes, within our forum, but also education in terms of bringing people through to industry as well. So that's been an important thing that's come up a few times, and awareness and alignment with other initiatives. So in order to future proof, we need to be aware of what's going on around us, I guess, and work out how that's going to affect what we're doing. And of course, understand the output required to deliver as constructed data in A-SPEC format. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in this, and so if anyone would like to talk a bit further about that, I'd welcome you to take your phone off mute or your computer off mute and sort of talk a bit more about that. Feel free just to interrupt, but basically, these are things that are really important. Now, someone's not on mute. So I'm just going to quickly find out who that is, because they're getting feedback. There it is. Great. So Stephen, did you have something you wanted to add to that understanding of the output required to deliver as constructed data?
You put me on the spot there.
You've been to every single forum, so I thought maybe.
Yeah. Look, I guess from my point of view is the fact that we can get as constructed data delivered to us electronically, and that really saves a lot of time. I mean, we go out to do PCs for gifted assets and capital projects, and we get to know a lot about there. But actual processing and getting the data in, to get it in that format is really, really good. It saves a lot of time, saves a lot of effort. At the moment, we don't actually match one-to-one with the A-SPEC format. But in saying that, we tend to, at Best Coast, we tend to sort of look at it as this is the minimum information that we need to be able to manage our assets. And every council does things differently. Every council shows things differently and collects other data. So I guess my main point is, yes, we need this information. And if it doesn't actually match your asset register, that doesn't really matter. It's the fact that we're getting that data, and you don't have to scroll through PDFs. You don't have to scroll through spreadsheets. You don't have to scroll through anything. It's there. And in some cases, I mean, the D-SPEC stuff we've been getting since 2012, I think it is. And we've gone through numerous asset registers. And even now, it's not, we can't just upload it straight into our asset register. It's sort of a manual thing, but it is certainly a hell of a lot better than trying to capture each one manually, which is what we used to do. We've gone from days to hours to process a D-SPEC. So look, it's all important. Some of the stuff we don't use, like the area of extent, but we do capture information in our asset register on who was the contractor who built it, the date it was built, and the plans and things like that. So I guess the fact is, if councils are starting to capture this stuff, it's probably a good start. And if they, because we originally set up, we had most of our assets on in the GIS. And when I started back in council, one of the first things we did was to set up the GIS as per A-SPEC, mainly D-SPEC, R-SPEC, O-SPEC, and all that. And as we got to the asset registers, obviously these things mature in time and things change, but we still follow that. And it's still pretty good. We're about to look at maybe looking at our code lists in our asset register and perhaps refining them back to the A-SPEC code lists.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it's really good that we've got this information and it's coming to us. And you know, obviously D-SPEC was the first. R-SPEC, I'd like to get a lot more R-SPEC and O-SPEC. And obviously being a Victorian council, we don't deal in sewer and water. So yeah, look, it's fantastic. It's really good.
Yeah, look, that's good feedback. Thank you, Stephen. Does anybody else have any comments I'd like to provide around these sort of findings? No? Okay, so we'll keep going on then. From Gabby, he talked about some tech stuff, and his key messages were details of the FID issue. I can't elaborate on that because I don't know what that is. Does anyone else want to kind of take yourself off mute and talk to me about what that is, FID issue?
Yeah, it's Michael Kelly.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah,
the FID is something that comes along with the shapefile export, and it's just a way to order the files, the lines in an attribute table, and they're not to be used as an ID when you're exporting it out into your GIS or AMOS. So it can be ignored. So pretty much, I'll just leave that at that for now.
Thanks, Michael. And also, Gabby suggested the use of C comments code, maintaining a single source of truth for A-SPEC data, and discussed the experimental use of drones in automated as constructed data capture. And we did have a quick chat about that earlier today, how the use of drones is really becoming quite a significant tool for our industry in terms of capturing data and analysing data, not ignoring the fact that we do have some challenges around flying and CASA requirements and regulations. So does anybody else, maybe Shane, do you have any comments around the series that you attended and spoke at, and in terms of any key takeaways that you might have from that? Which one did you do again? I can't remember. The A-SPEC, was it, Shane?
Hi, Kelly. Yeah, I did the A-SPEC. I don't like key takeaways. Well, there wasn't much new. It was interesting to see how many people are using the new standards. But and to hear from some other aspects, like from council perspective, how they use the data that we're creating, which is really good. It just highlights, as always, how important conversations are to have with the contractor, the consultant, and then ultimately the council or the water authority.
Yeah. So it was a good forum. We had quite a few attendees in that forum as well. So it was interesting to talk about what was going on with the A-SPEC. Does anybody else have any more comments before we move on? We're a little bit early, so we have some time. I talk very fast, so we've zoomed through a little bit.
Yeah, Kelly, it's Michael again. I'd just like to, some of the key takeaways from most of the presentations is really about data governance, the governance side of what we're doing with A-SPEC. We looked at checklists and forms, particularly in regard to where the checklist helps people or clients understand what classes they need to capture with in their projects. It helps understanding what the output files will be, and this comes back to the as constructed data that's really important for the delivery. As Stephen said, receiving digital as constructed files with amendments of pathways or different tolerances within invert levels, or the way it may be with sewer and water, the gradients of pipes. And so that was really important to understand that using all of these forms that are associated with A-SPEC assist with what's to be delivered to the client, that, you know, to council or utility at the end of the project, and then how that data can be consumed in those systems. So that was pretty important, and I think this is what some people are, you know, interested in talking about and saying is the turnaround from the plan to as constructed and the supporting information that comes with that. So the files are there, the checklists are there, and it's a good idea to utilise them, but you need to understand what they're for, and engagement at using these things, using these documents at the beginning of a project is essential. So,
Great.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments that anyone would like to make? Great. So we'll move on to our first speaker and our keynote speaker, Adam Beck. Now, Adam works for Hub, and you can follow him on LinkedIn with that QR code. He does lots of really cool stuff, so I would recommend that you all jump on there and connect with Adam on LinkedIn. Currently, Adam is the General Manager for Business and Marketing Development at the Hub, which is an Indira company. So he works collaboratively with government and the private sector to realise the benefits of shared urban infrastructure in connecting, activating and measuring urban life. And before this, Adam was founding Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand and Director of Innovation at Eco Districts in Portland in the USA, and Executive Director at the Green Building Council of Australia. So he loves all that sort of building stuff. And before entering the mission-driven sector, Adam spent 15 years with global consulting firms such as ARUP and GHD. He is the chair of the Planning Institute of Australia in Queensland, Plan Tech Working Group, co-chair of the Smart Places and Infrastructure Workstream at the Internet of Things Alliance, and founding leadership team member of the Digital Twin Partnership. And I actually met Adam a few years ago when he was doing some work with the Digital Twin side of things, and thought he would have a great some great things to show us today. So Adam, did you want to take over the screen share, and do you have a presentation?
Yes, Kelly, I do. Let me try and get this moving here. Okay. Let me know when you see that. Hopefully it shouldn't be too far away. Is that all good?
Yep.
Okay. Kelly, thanks for that kind and diverse, eclectic introduction. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm joining this meeting from today, which is in Brisbane, Queensland, and acknowledge the land north and south of the Brisbane River as home to both the Turrbal and Yagara nations, and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. From that introduction, you probably don't get a sense of what that career journey looks like, but to sort of really summarize it, around about 16 and a half years deep in the private sector consulting technical world before moving to the sort of mission-driven non-profit world. And the reason I highlight that is sort of I did all the detailed stuff at the early part of my career, and then whilst there was a lot of technical and detail in the most recent sort of 12, 15 years, it's been in the non-profit sector who typically spend a lot of their life trying to convince and nudge and change the world. You know, non-profit organizations often have big, bold missions, and typically they all look the same, which is we want to change the world, whatever lens we sort of look at it. So I was, you know, 4 and a bit years with the Green Building Council of Australia, and that was a world where we wanted to change the way we built the built environment, big and bold. And then off to the US and worked with a small startup think tank in Portland, Oregon, who wanted to transform the way that we planned our communities and did community development and regeneration. And then my most recent sort of, you know, mission-driven part of my career was with the Smart Cities Council. And, you know, I thought that we could sort of solve all of our planetary woes by embracing digital and data. So it's been a very interesting career journey for a very analog town planner and social planner, so to speak. And you know, when I kind of reflect on that, which invitations like this, and thank you, Kelly, and the team for inviting me, it gives you the opportunity to sort of reflect, and the idea of a keynote speaker, you know, hopefully you sort of, you know, share some wisdom and engage people. And I wanted to start by sort of sharing in one kind of image, you know, where I think the digital data world is at. And when I look at the digital and data world, it's typically through a built environment and natural environment lens. And I had a number of different images that I had on this one slide, but I kind of landed here because it summarizes our world pretty well. You know, we're always in flight. I describe, you know, my day job as being a full contact sport, and just trying to wrestle things to the ground all the time. So, you know, at times, as we all know, it's not for the faint-hearted, and particularly when you throw in sort of, you know, multi-sector interests across public sector and private sector, it can get a little bit challenging. With that, I've been part of a whole bunch of approaches to building cities. Some of these things are tools, some of them are software, some of them are big, bold ideas, some of them are very, very standardized, some of them are not, some of them eventually got there. And so I was at Arup, and for 5 years I sat alongside the, you know, the buildings team, watching them day by day prepare for the BIM onslaught that was going to come. And, you know, we sat there, the whole team was trained up in the Brisbane office, ready to roll in 2006, 7, 8, and kind of it never came. And that's been the extent of my BIM experience, pretty much. You know, watching the private sector ready themselves for what was going to be world changing. And I don't know enough to comment on the state of BIM at the moment, but it's had a very interesting journey. But it's great that we have standards. At GIS, I played around with that a little bit, you know, as a young town planner, doing natural resource management and things like that. Have been deeply embedded inside, at times feeling like an imposter in the Internet of Things world. I set up the Smart Cities Council in Australia and New Zealand around about the same time that the Internet of Things Alliance in Australia was set up, 2016 era. And what's interesting for those that like to, you know, be commentators and spectators alike, just the last month or so, there's been sort of that narrative that IoT is dead, and I kind of like provocative comments and judgments like that, because more than anything it gets us to reflect on our industry. And Frank Zeichner, who is the CEO of the Internet of Things Alliance Australia put out in his last sort of members sort of CEO opening letter a few weeks ago. Yes, IoT is dead, but it's very much alive and now business as usual. So I like to track affiliated agendas and advocacy efforts to see how things are resonating, what's sticking and what isn't. And I know too well the good, the bad and the ugly when it comes to trying to catalyze transformation, because in the smart cities agenda and movement, it was a wild time. Digital twin is kind of as smart cities was shutting up shop, digital twin was sort of walking into the room. So have been deep in the digital twin world in Australia, in the UK and the US. But I find myself now working for an infrastructure company which day to day does stuff on the ground in terms of designing products, deploying things. And so digital urbanism has become, a new sort of interest for me. And I'll sort of describe a little bit about that as I go through this presentation. So here was 2016. It's funny when you go back, and it feels odd to quote myself in a presentation. But when we set up the Smart Cities Council back in 2016, of course it was all a buzz, and it was just pure randomness and luck that I launched the Smart Cities Council a month before Malcolm Turnbull launched and released Australia's first Smart Cities plan for the nation. So there could not have been a better springboard for a transformation agenda like Smart Cities found itself in 2016, off the back of $50 million of national funding for a handful of years. One thing that is always a sign of change and opportunity is when you start to see these things not necessarily legislated, but you start to see sort of policy starting to use words that you like and you've been sort of a cheerleader for. And in 2020 we started to sort of really see some advocacy fruit bear itself when the New South Wales Smart Infrastructure Policy was released, and it started to talk about things like every infrastructure project, over $5 million or whatever it was, needs to start baking in sensors, and it needs to gather data, and of course we need all the relevant settings in place. But for nerds in the IoT world, I mean, we were just salivating. This is just perfect. We get this baked in now to sort of every infrastructure project. But there was still something sort of lacking at a macro level, at a national level, and of course 2021 was followed up with the national, the Australian Infrastructure Plan out of Infrastructure Australia, essentially, making the statement that all infrastructure will be digital by default. And it was music to our ears. We started to sort of see some detail emerged at a national level that when we spend money on infrastructure, we're going to start seeing these kind of things, digital twin, incorporated into funding decisions. We're going to see sort of a national digital infrastructure roadmap, ideas like digital asset champions. Probably more than ideas, these are actually, progress measures in that national document. So 2021 was a really great year, and we were excited. And the idea of digital twin, we felt was really starting to sort of, bake in some way. Last year, Standards Australia, I helped co-author a white paper around digital twin and what it would mean for Australia, and in particular, it had a bit of a focus around the talent we have here nationally and the ability for sort of, not only putting Australia on the map, but the export potential as well. So it was a really interesting exercise to write a paper with that lens of digital and data being a national asset that we could export among other goals and ambitions and things like that. But as much as sort of I've learned talking about digital and data and it just rolling off the tongue, I suppose it was around about that same time where I started to realize that there was a certain element of this data discussion that wasn't being had with the community. And we've all learned that politicians like to cut ribbons on things, stand at the beginning of a new highway, a new building and things like that. Digital and data is very hard to sort of cut a ribbon on or around. And so this idea of data being the new oil and, a data grab, very, very much being part of, the sort of the cry for, good growth. It seemed that there was some parts of that data conversation that weren't happening, or at least, not a lot of structure around. So I spent some time in 2022 from a smart cities perspective, just trying to sort of, bring some fundamentals onto one page that we could more than anything use in our advocacy activities. And that's when the data leadership vitals emerged, purpose, privacy, security, ethics, and governance. Our sort of approach was, don't think about digital projects, don't think about digital transformation, don't think about sensors and funding and the glitter and the rainbows, and all this promise of technology unless you're a good data leader. So that's when my personal sort of interest more in data being the key as opposed to technology leading the conversation. That's when my interest in data, really started to come to life. So yes, very new, only a couple of years ago. And of course, that then led me to digital twin. And as a town planner and a social planner, the way in which I sort of assess things, view things, and then sort of, make decisions can sometimes be a bit quirky compared to a lot of my, digital and data friends who, have lived and breathed this their entire life. And so I was very attracted to the idea of the digital twin, digital replica of something, knowing that there needed to be a connection so that data could flow between them. And it was also at this time where my work, at Hub, started to, pay close attention to our digital connectivity landscape. Hub is owned by Indara. Indara is a special purpose vehicle owned by Australian Super. It was set up 4 years ago to invest in Australia's digital infrastructure future, and its first acquisition was to buy all of Optus's cell towers and rooftop sites. So it was a multi-billion-dollar acquisition overnight, and next thing Indara owned, a significant portion of the nation's, base infrastructure that holds our mobile connectivity together. So I kind of, Hub then got acquired. It was the second acquisition by Indara. So I spent a lot of my day job around mobile digital connectivity people. So that idea of a connection, of course, was of great interest. But, I really got frustrated again coming back to language and concepts and standards. And at this time, there was no digital twin standards that existed in the world, technically. It was the frustration that led me to try and understand a little bit more this language that we were using, because day by day, another person standing up and saying digital twin means 1,000 things to 1,000 different people. And it was kind of like, no, it doesn't. It means one thing, which is what it is, but that wasn't clearly articulated or communicated or standardized. So I really sort of set aside time with the digital twin working group at the Smart Cities Council to really try and unpack not what a digital twin is, but more so what it does. And so that's where the capability sort of model and framework started to emerge. It's not just a digital replica of a target entity, which it is, but that digital replica, it's more about what that digital replica does, ingesting data, integrating it, analyzing it, simulating it, visualizing. So those capabilities really started to sort of emerge, and they really started to resonate. And people would go, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I can tangibly see it. And that's when I think the GIS community, the IoT community, and the BIM community started to sort of see, okay, I can see where I fit within this digital twin world. Because a lot of people felt, particularly when I spoke to a lot of the GIS community, they felt that, digital twin walked into the room and just sucked the oxygen out of it. And it's like, hang on, hello, we're here, the GIS community, we've been around for decades and decades. And so mapping those capabilities of BIM GIS over or under digital twin, was an exercise that ended up being very, very powerful. And subsequently, these capabilities have now become a key footnote in ISO 30173, which defines digital twin. So it talks about the digital replica of an entity that can perform functions including data integration, analysis, simulation, visualization. So that was really, really good to see that. But we're a nation that likes to sort of, build things, and a lot of my work, and I imagine a lot of our work, is focused around, capital delivery and O&M. And this is really sort of a slide and some work that I've tried to use to adjust my thinking in the digital and data world, which is, this is where the spend goes. This is where the national spend goes. And so as much as my peers advancing a digital and data agenda in the way that we sort of plan, design and build and operate and maintain things, there is a massive world out there where taxpayers' money goes, which is the delivery of services. And I think I'd probably speak on behalf of a couple of people to say that our efforts to advocate for digital and data enabled transformation has typically been focused on the first two on the left, possibly not service delivery on the right. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity. But again, as we know, we're a nation that loves to build stuff. And I don't know whether this was a moment where I was meant to cry or be happy when Smart Cities was made fun of course, in that famous Utopia episode. I think there was sort of a bit of both. But bringing it down to sort of building things and coming back to the relationship of digital and data in the community, where I found a lot of times sort of we were getting lost in translation, or it was becoming unstuck, and therefore in particular instances why government was not necessarily investing as fast as I wanted it to. I think it was because we have done a really poor job in what it means for the community. Like, what is digital infrastructure? What does it look like? And what does it mean for the community, that just wants sort of good, frictionless experiences? I think as technicians, a lot of the time, we can sort of, again, roll off terms very easily off the tongue, but breaking that down to an audience that, maybe we don't engage with necessarily a lot of the time, that's where there's been some friction. And as I suppose, bringing it back to my day job now, I work with a team of industrial designers and technology integrators on digitally enabled products that get deployed in the public realm, and they collect data. So it doesn't get any closer to the community than sort of what I'm doing now in my day job. And as a private sector product company, we think we know best. we all do, right? We create the best products. Here's one of our multifunction poles at Hub that over 20 years, it started as doing one thing, which was a light pole shining light. At last count, we've now got up to 32 different accessories and digital devices. And that's certainly been based on demand and interest. And there was a moment when every local council wanted free public Wi-Fi in a park. So some of it was very much demand driven. But we know as private sector innovators, we want to sort of try and gain competitive advantage and identify the next best thing. And it's a really challenging space. And internally at the moment, right now, we're actually doing a full review of our product roadmap and trying to understand, what's next, what comes after these 32 things. How many of those 32 things does the community actually, need? Does local government actually want or invest in? So it's a really tough world, and that real interface, technology, data, the public realm, and the community has led me to continue to get more engaged in those analog professions that represent the community very well. So going back to my planning roots, I've been spending a lot of time in that world, which is starting to emerge. The planning profession is a bit of a latecomer. I'll be honest in saying that. And so Plan Tech is now becoming a thing, and I chair the Planning Institute of Australia Queensland Plan Tech Working Group. So planning is a really interesting profession and process. Combine that with digital and combine it with data, and we have a concoction of absolute, at times, chaos, craziness, but I think glass half full for me, some amazing opportunity. Digital moves at eye-watering pace. The velocity is insane. The value of data, who has value, who owns value, who we can extract value for, is, always up for serious debate. Planning is more of a political exercise than a technical exercise. It's about equity and who gets what. And that's something that we often forget. Planners, their role is to protect the public realm, and most of our plans are essentially a visual representation of who can do what, where, and when. And it's a very, very powerful role that the planner plays. And so with that, trust becomes, a key word that I throw into the mix that we often, don't talk enough about. So there's this really interesting, stronger and stronger convergence between digital data and planning that I'm seeing happening not only here, but also in the US and the UK as well. And just on that trust word, I'll sort of just to sort of wrap here a little bit. I've been sort of observing from a distance this very interesting open standard that's come out of Canada called DTPR, digital trust in the public realm and routines, DTPR. It's changed names a few bits. It originally came from the work that Google did in their Sidewalk Labs spin-off in the Toronto waterfront redevelopment that eventually sort of crashed and burned after the community somewhat chased them out of town, because Google wanted to create a community of the future that was going to sense and collect all of this data, and the rest is history. There's articles written about it a mile long. But what did the phoenix that rose from the ashes of that project was this open source standard that's available to everyone for free, but stewarded by a non-profit out of Canada, where we disclose what technology we're using in the public realm, what data we're gathering, and for what purpose. And Sydney Olympic Park has just been part of a global pilot program, the first in Australia, to sort of do things like you see on the slide here, the image here, which is to clearly communicate to the public what data, what technology we're using, what data we're collecting, and why we're doing it. And this sort of iconography has been established, which is part of the open standard. So an interesting one that I recommend anyone involved in tech and data in the public realm, in public places, a very interesting project. This whole idea of pushing boundaries and being ready for new things, I don't really have anything to say here, but it's just a prompt for me to say that we often don't learn. And I've been trying to convince people that public area mobile robots are going to be the next Uber, right? Where it comes overnight, comes out of nowhere. It was never part of anyone's plan, any government's plan. And of course, what happens is they arrive, the private sector lead the charge, and then essentially it gets halted. We stop, we pause, we try and do pilots, and we try and work it out. Just the interest, the graph on the left there's the searches on food delivery robots over the last 5 years. It's not subtle in terms of the growth of interest. And Sunshine Coast Regional Council up here in Queensland are the first organisation in Australia to become a member of the Urban Robotics Foundation. So, we got to get better as policymakers and practitioners to work together to engage around what some think are crazy ideas, but I think they're going to be here sooner rather than later. And of course, get on the front foot and develop standards. And it is nice to see that standards around public area mobile robots, PMRs, has actually started at an international level. So this is kind of a really interesting case study where the standard comes in some way before the actual thing, if that makes sense. So there's some really interesting dialogue going on globally around that. Finally, also just to sort of end on standards, I started my standards life at the Green Building Council of Australia, which was a set of 105 things that you had to do. That was it. 105 things made up a green building. It was black and white. It was on one page, and I loved it. And the world loved it, and the markets love it. And so 20 years later, you do not plan, design, build, or operate, a premium grade office building in this country, let alone any city in the Western world, that is not green rated, because on day of opening, it is devalued by the institutional investors. It is devalued if it is not rated. And what powered that entire green building economy was a standard. Originally, it was a list of 105 things, but allowed us to get on the same page, clear terminology, no ambiguity. Let's move forward and do it. And it pushed us and it challenged us. And so what I continue to tinker with is how do we sort of do that for digital and data in the public realm, in our public places, in a way that really engages and excites and I suppose encourages us to sort of move forward and move through the pain and seek gain. So love the continual sort of evolution in this space and how standards play an absolute critical role. Kelly, with that, I'm done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Adam. That was very interesting to hear your presentation. I actually have a couple of questions though. In terms of that, in 2021, when the government said that they wanted to incorporate digital twins into their projects and have this digital by default sort of standard or process, how have they gone with that? Is there any feedback? Have they actually done what they said or started to do what they said they were going to do?
Oh, look, unfortunately, what unfolded was a change of government federally. There was a big review of Infrastructure Australia. A lot of things changed. It changed in CEOs. I think IA would say that digital by default is still on their agenda. Wow. But I think it's also fair to say that they've been sort of adjusting their priorities and focus. So not all lost, but I will say that Consult Australia has kind of really taken a lead and picked up the mantle on digital by default as sort of a an advocacy agenda, and they've actually released a white paper just recently in the last few weeks that has a whole range of asks, not only to Canberra and politicians and policymakers at a national level, but also at a state as well. So digital by default is not dead. It's still alive and kicking, but I wouldn't say we've made huge progress necessarily.
It's a shame they haven't progressed that as they intended. Anyway, look, the other thing as well, just in terms of digital twins, in my limited research, it seems that we still have, even though we have the tech, there's still some questions around digital twin education of just people in general, and the data standards they're still being created, right? They're not finished. Yeah,
look, I have a conflict of interest here, but I'll make some statements. So I'm a co-founder and co-director of Tempo Institute, which is a sort of like a capability development company that I set up with my colleague Gavin Cottrell about 2 years ago, when we were frustrated at the slow pace of digital twin uptake. We found out that the problem was our lack of awareness and capability. So we developed a micro-credential for digital twin. The UK have recently done one as well. Yes, standards are a little bit rubbery when it comes to digital twin. Using that terminology of digital twin standards, they're emerging, but a lot of the fundamentals behind doing new things with data and having good standards already exist. So it's also a little bit challenging, and I think this is why the Digital Twin Partnership sort of was born a year and a half ago. Was we have strong representation of many digital and data enabling agendas represented or being represented by professional organizations and professional associations, but digital twin was kind of falling through the cracks. Geospatial Council of Australia had a committee. I used to be on that. I think they still have one now. But spatial digital twins became sort of terminology. Personally, I don't think that was or is helpful. Digital twin is a thing, and whether they're spatially enabled or whatever enabled, that's kind of subtext. But look, I think when I track the UK and the US, the Digital Twin Consortium, it's really focusing on private sector, manufacturing, aerospace, other things. The UK government is more so through the Digital Catapult leading the digital twin conversation in the UK. They've partnered with universities to bring some training online. So look, globally, it's a bit of a mess, but we're sort of wading through it and we're sort of making some advances. But I think digital twin right now is at that point where, as it's climbing to the peak before the trough of disillusionment, it's either got the opportunity to sort of continue to peak or it kind of crashes and burns, right? But Spatial WA, Digital Twin Victoria, Queensland Government with their SEQ Digital Twin project, New South Wales, of course, out there, originally, making the first move. We've got most ACT looking, going through sort of behind the scenes business case stuff. We're only left with the NT and somewhat TAS as the only two states and territories not using taxpayers' money to invest in digital twin capabilities. So something tells me that we're going to be okay. I am more buoyed I was more buoyed when I saw Infrastructure Australia sort of walk into the room wanting digital by default and digital twins everywhere. But as you know, we've just noticed it's maybe gone off the boil a little bit. So look, Australia is in a strong position globally when it comes to digital twin capability and us using tools and knowledge to do better things with data. But like all of these things, like smart cities, like IoT, you know, those things have kind of died. We don't want the same with digital twin.
I kind of feel like we've got we need to kind of nationally work together on creating that, you know, the digital approach.
Yeah, and it's a really, you know, there's a tried and tested formula for this, which I learned at the Green Building Council. So have a standard that brings everyone together. It's technically robust, and it essentially is the engine room. But a standard is on its own is absolutely useless. You then need the advocacy strategy, which is essentially your political strategy. You need the technical strategy of getting leaders to embrace it, using it, and showing and reporting the value and benefit. And then you need the capability development strategy, right? So every standard needs 4 strategies wrapped around it, and no agenda or no transformation or no kind of technological advancement, i.e. digital twin, will succeed unless it has all 4. And the green building agenda and movement is probably one of, if not the most advanced and successful transformations globally, because when the money flows into your agenda and it doesn't stop, and they use your agenda as the reason they invest or not, you know, that's when you've affected change. The money goes towards the good thing that you've created. So there's a clear blueprint there. And the green building movement has took 20 years to get there, but they've got there.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you. Sorry, I hold the question time. Does anyone else have any more questions for Adam? Okay, it's gonna disrupt the thing. All right. Well, thank you very much, Adam. I really appreciate your conversation and getting a sort of feel as to where you're at now with everything. So thank you. And I did put Adam's LinkedIn profile up for everyone. So please feel free to reach out to Adam on LinkedIn and further discussions if it's of interest. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so our next speakers are, I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, I should be better at this. I've just got too many things open and the cat's distracting me. So thank you. Our next speakers are Colin, Hobson and Phillip Nell from Open Spatial. Can you all see my screen? And you can see Colin and Phillip's LinkedIn tiles there if you want to connect with them on LinkedIn. Colin is a GIS professional and is based in California and has over 30 years of GIS experience, including 10 years at Autodesk in GIS. He has been with Open Spatial since 2005. Colin has both a deep and broad knowledge of GIS, including key involvement in many projects in America, Canada, Australia, the UK, South America, and South Africa. Phillip is in asset management, and he did his course through Chifley Business School. He also works for Open Spatial. He's based in Sydney and has extensive experience in the water industry and local government GIS solutions, including over 10 years working with deploying A-SPEC. So I'd like to welcome Colin and Phillip to our presentations today. Colin, who's going to share their screen? Have you got presentations?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. So over to you then.
All right, thank you. And Phillip and I can turn on our cameras to say hi. I'll leave it on. That's fine for now. So share the screen. All right. You should see a PowerPoint coming up. Okay, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. Yeah, so Phillip will do most of the nuts and bolts, and I've had the privilege of rolling AC/DC out in the US, so a couple of different experiences. And AC/DC obviously is one of the open spatial products as constructed design certification, and we'll kind of run through what we've done with A-SPEC v5 and look at that specifically. I did wanted to show, I know George unfortunately is not here for this meeting, but he has actually been to our offices, and this was a national balloon race. So just, and you'll notice not one balloon looks much like the other. In general, it's the same, but they all look different. And, you can actually see, I think at this particular one, there were 75 or so balloons. So kind of crazy. And a lot of hot air, of course, but different shapes, sizes, everything else. And just thought I'd set that up because I'll show you one right at the end as well. But it's to do with, standards. Are they all the same? How do you track these, map these, and work on data? So just thought I would start up with that to get your attention. The AC/DC product, and I'm not going to go over these in absolute last detail, but it is a long-standing product in the Australian market. We cover all of the A-SPEC standards. We have toolkits for all of those and have done so for a long time. It is, even though the focus here is A-SPEC, system itself is completely configurable, which has been really useful in applying it to other geographies. And what we do is provide tools and toolkits, which we'll show in a minute, to help consultants and surveyors and GIS folks on the data capture end of the spectrum. Really a big focus there, and I'll highlight that in a minute. Then we expand out on our product, a whole lot of validation and conversion tools, a couple of exciting things we will be showing today. So track that. And the itself, AC/DC, we've been developing it for more than 12 years in response to, and it's kind of interesting what Adam had to say. In the US, I wish that the government organizations here had at least half of the vision and set up as many approaches to getting people to standardize. I think Australia's actually ahead. Here I'm sort of in the Wild West, as it were, in terms of standards, data processes, etc. In terms of our product, we've done tens of thousands of submissions. It's been doubling basically every year on year for the last 3 years. We include a whole lot of different things that are configurable, things like rules and the outputs and domain values, and all the CAD stuff that goes with it. Long-standing A-SPEC as a standard. In the North America, we don't have something like A-SPEC. We probably have 5 or 6 different ones. And so we've actually built on that and taken the national CAD standard to apply the CAD side of the house to a data model and build that out in various data models. But I'm not going to speak about that too much in this meeting. Just as a graphic, CAD, I noticed you guys did some quizzes on your earlier sessions, which was great, and I appreciate that. But it seems there's still the vast majority of information is still being gathered by CAD or is taken through CAD and then put into GIS. But if AC/DC, what we're doing is taking the information right from the beginning all the way through to the end, and including the conversion and the validation and stuff like that. So it's much more than an ETL kind of product. It's dealing with the spatial stuff and the data capture pieces, and provides actual tools for doing that. And what we found is something like AutoCAD or any CAD program is highly variable. People can do whatever they like in whatever way they like, which is completely a problem when it comes to standards. And so A-SPEC is great on the data side of that, but on the CAD side, that's a whole different ballgame. How to get CAD specifically set up to be able to work on that. So if we look at this workflow, AC/DC gets involved right here at the ASCON stage, so that those drawings are drawn in a way with the data, and so drawn with all of the attributes as per A-SPEC. And then we introduce a whole lot of validation. It could be in the cloud, drag and drop the drawing. People can have their own portals. Turnaround time is a matter of minutes. We add in workflow definitions. You can customize those for your organization. We found that to be really useful. It was interesting what Adam had to say. It's not just the data standard. There's organizational processes or industry-wide processes. And that's what we found with AC/DC. The product, the technological solution is actually, it's done. We can already do that. The bigger challenge is actually getting the organizations to deploy and set up between the different players within that. So you can output the data straight into QGIS. You can put in the drawing. We actually have it now that you can take a validated drawing with all your A-SPEC parameters and view that with the attributes right in a DWG viewer, right in the website, in the portal itself. So you don't need to have, it really helps GIS folks. They don't need a CAD license. They can just view that straight up. Of course, they can pull that straight into ArcGIS Online is something we just added recently. So that's available as an extension. And of course, we've shown this, I think, at our last couple of forums, Digital Twin Victoria or CZML files. So you can go right from CAD all the way through this workflow with AC/DC from the get-go and build that out. And that is really useful for organizations because it addresses a whole lot of things. It'll get you a CAD standard that aligns with your GIS standard. It'll get you the domain values that go with. So pretty useful. So I'm going to hand over to Phillip to talk about the toolkit within what we provide for people to use A-SPEC standards, but within the context of the CAD, the AC/DC product, and the rules and domain values. Over to you, Phillip.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So in terms of A-SPEC, we had what we call the A-SPEC V3 set of tools before, and that is before George started to combine his A-SPECs as one version number. So we called it V3. It aligned with our product. And at this stage, we then, now that he calls his V5, we just jumped our one across to V5. So that's why there's no V4, but for our customers. So if you get, there's just a jump. So between V3 and V5, I just summarized basically that by A-SPEC V5 consolidated changes document. You'll see there's new asset types, new attributes, new tables, code list, things that's removed. So we brought all those changes into V5, as well as the code list that's in the second dot point there. And if there was any conflicts between what that consolidated PDF and also the spreadsheet said, we took the PDFs of the individual specifications as the sort of source of truth. So this is sort of the big picture view of how we went from V3 to V5. And that's so AC/DC has a toolkit. We call it that because it's a whole set of little deliverables that makes life easier across our product, but as also across the users of our products and the source of the data that Colin spoke about. So we've got sort of 12 things. The validation set and the staging DB, those first two, they sit in the portal, and the staging DB sits in sort of at some of the customers if they need it. So those two are shown there. I did add that new asset management system formatted import files. There is an output that's a new thing that's in the portal, and Colin will mention that a little bit later. I just noticed that almost half of all the attendees in the previous ones were council people. So what we're doing there is we basically take the A-SPEC format and structures, and we add columns, remove columns. We add, maybe concatenate the diameter of 100 plus the little as the asset management system would want them. So a whole lot of rules we can configure to build those import files directly out of the A-SPEC, and you could just take that and it's part of the export out of the portal. Anyway, so I just meant that as a side thing. Next one there is BricsCAD and AutoCAD menus. So you can see the A-SPEC V5 menu there with the flyouts of every single asset class. So that is part of the toolkit. Next one, Colin. In the templates for AutoCAD and BricsCAD, I didn't show all the blocks and this and that, but this is the layer manager of AutoCAD showing all the layers, and there's about 150 odd layers that that is part of the template, plus a block for each one of them to enable the capture of the data of the attributes with it.
Philip, just going back to to this one. So these menus are essentially macros, so that somebody doesn't need to know what layer it is or what the block name is. They can just click on that and it will automatically put on the right layer. It'll have the right attributes all ready to go. We found this taking to the US a huge benefit, because it's tough to go and ask the CAD people to say, hey, you know, you need to know the name of every attribute that we need and what the feature is and how to build it. And so this has been huge in terms of that. Big question is, how do we get the people creating the data to actually use these standards? So I'll move on now and to the next slide.
Yep. So this is the attributor. So this is a very neat little product that can be downloaded from the AutoCAD shop or store or whatever they call it. And it makes the capture of the attributes really, really easy. It shows you the default values. It will highlight the mandatory ones. It will show the drop down. So the screenshot there is of a type, a pit type, and you can see the codes and the values there in the drop down. So it makes life quite a bit easier for the surveyors or the internal engineering team to capture the data according to A-SPEC and all its dependencies. So that is attributor, and it's free and usable for anybody to download from the portal.
And so in the toolkit, essentially what we provide is a set of files that allow people to use these drop-down standards offline and on their own. So once again, that impact on the draftsperson is huge, because now they've got this stuff right at their fingertips. They know it's going to be correct. And that same thing in the US market made a big difference.
Yep. And then lastly, with shapefiles, so we also provide a whole set of shapefiles, empty shapefiles. So there's no features, no data in them, but they are all structured exactly as A-SPEC V5 with all the new changes in there. And that screenshot is just showing the building specification with the asset classes there, and the properties or the attributes or fields, as A-SPEC calls them, for the signs. So everything's there. You can use any tool. This is QGIS, totally free, and it's got all the attributes, everything in there. And our portal supports the import of shapefiles and of AutoCAD and BricsCAD and even MapInfo mid-MIF files. So yeah, I think that's my story. So the toolkit is up and ready, and we'll be deploying that to customers in the coming time. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, I'll just, I know we're running tight here, so I'll go. The inputs we've been talking about, but the idea that you can also take a shapefile. So in that workflow where I showed a lot of CAD work, you can still take data directly without CAD, straight as MIF/MID or shapefiles, and pull it in anyway. We've also putting output into Esri, Oracle, Mansus, QGIS. Showed the viewer. One thing that's, and Phillip talked about the asset management. Load files, that can be done in parallel with the spatial data, and of course formatted to match your particular asset management system. I wanted to show you this. This is really the, on the portal, we built in that DWG viewer. So if you drop on the menu, you can see two new functions. The one is view the drawing. So if you take, this is our standard a test drawing for one of the A-SPEC standards. You can see, you click on something, there's all the attributes. This is a DWG file, and now you can see those attributes without having to have AutoCAD. And along those lines, we also added the ArcGIS Online. So if I go in here, you can see this is a validated drawing. Once it's validated, this is actually the same drawing I was showing you. You can go to the action button and go and look at it. So obviously the errors are being checked. You can get all the reports and everything standard AC/DC, and I won't go into all of that. But if you click that asset action button, if you have this module extension for AC/DC, you can click on that and then you'll be able to view that file. And part of that is when you go to ArcGIS Online, you need a login. You need a predefined project, and so organizations would need to set that up, and we would configure this to point you from your portal to that. So if you take that drawing, you can click on it, load it up. So this is now the validated data. You've been able to do this essentially if you took the data and put in QGIS, you could do it. Yes, a standard drawing where we've got the D-SPEC and some R-SPEC stuff. And you can just go through that. We can set it up so it can view straight, go open the viewer and zoom straight to that layer, but there may be multiple features in that. So you can go straight in there, turn them on, zoom to it, and you're now in ArcGIS Online. That blue box actually is the project extent. So part of the validation we're doing with AC/DC is check that the assets fall within the min-max of the project. And so if you go here and say we turn on some of those and you click on a line or whatever, you're going to, or you can show the data tables, all of your A-SPEC structures, all of the data's there, and pretty much that's done. And at this point, obviously that data could go straight into your Esri databases as well. So with this is a new feature that we just rolling out right now, and we're quite excited by that. I think that'll make it fairly useful for folks. And then there's a lot of things that we've built out, validation rules, compound rules, checking stuff that can be configured and run automatically as you run through the stuff. We've added directionality, checking for direction, as well as actually checking the data against the rules for upstream, downstream. You can even look at consistencies between those, distance checks, one feature from a distance of another one, like a water meter within a distance of a electric substation or whatever. Those be two different features. Or you have to have a play structure inside of a playground. You can set all of those and multiple rules. So in summary then, what I showed you, that workflow, now there's the ArcGIS Online, but pretty much you can go from there to there. And what we found is not the technology, it's actually the deployment within an organization to get planning, to get inspections, to get public works, to get folks in the council sign off, to get all of that to work together is as large a challenge as the technology. But the toolkits really help on this end and on the GIS side, because it's a huge leg up to get you started from day one. So that's there. And then obviously digital twins, you can go in and take this stuff. There's validated roads and drainage, and pop that straight into Victoria, Digital Twin Victoria right there. And then of course I have I thought I had lots. Just last thing then, last slide. We will have a webinar if you're interested more about AC/DC and how the A-SPEC stuff works. 25th of September, you can log in there. You can go look at openspatial.com, look at the events page, or you can take that QR code. And then my last slide is this little video at 5 in the morning, all of that hot air. And this is a duel between, and it's only 4 seconds long, a musical duel between the balloons, and they each have to respond and light up their fire, depending on whether they hear a banjo or different. So here we go. Anyway, I thought you'd find. So if you want to take off, AC/DC can do that for you. So thanks very much, Kelly. Appreciate it. I'm happy to take questions if we have time.
Thank you. We do have a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask your questions. Okay, so we don't have any questions.
Right. Well, thanks. And yeah, we'll do a we'll do a webinar on the 25th. But we have them pretty much every other month anyway. So anybody wants information, they can go on the website, take a look. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin and Phillip. And you can also put their LinkedIn contacts up before, so please feel free to reach out to both Colin and Phillip via LinkedIn as well. So our next speakers, I'll just pop them on my screen. Okay. So we do have Andrew Dowding and Paul Farrell from Winyama and NGIS. And so I've just got my speaker notes on the other screen, so I'll quickly move that across and introduce them both. So Andrew is the managing director of a company called Winyama, and Winyama is a GIS company, and they also they're a geospatial location intelligence and digital solutions provider to those working across the Indigenous land estate, and also an enabler of young Indigenous talent seeking careers in technology. And Andrew's role is to manage and guide Winyama, create opportunities for the team to grow into their roles, and most importantly, to generate work for organisations to be sustainable. Andrew has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Sydney, majoring in both anthropology and history, and is currently PhD candidate in Indigenous Arts and Cultural Development at the University of Melbourne. Andrew has lived and worked in a range of places from Perth, Broome, Arnhem Land, Los Angeles and Sydney, New Delhi and Roebourne. Each of these places has influenced the skills and experience that he brings to the current role, and Andrew's major professional roles have been in the fields of native title, ethnographic heritage survey, and more recently in Indigenous mapping. His passion is Indigenous mapping and the use of tech for cultural safeguarding. He co-founded Winyama in 2018 to provide more opportunity for Indigenous people to work in the geospatial industry within the broader digital economy. Paul Farrell has been in the industry for quite some time. He is the Managing Director of NGIS Australia and co-founder of Winyama. Paul is also passionate about his family and spending time with his wife and twin daughters. He's fully involved in sport, playing AFL, and in the winter doing triathlons in the summer. He's based in WA, and he spent 5 years living and working in Asia and almost 2 years of his life in Rottnest Island over the length of his life, which he refers to as his soul home. Paul is a qualified Bachelor of Science, an executive MBA from University of WA, and a postgrad diploma in management of Australian National University. He's involved in many boards, including Point Terra, Frontier SI, and the WA Regional Development Trust. He's a past national chairman of Spatial Industries Business Association and was previously a board member of the Australian Information Industry Association. He is a strategic thinker and has an appetite for seeing how far spatial information can change businesses and society for the better. He is sought after by both government and commercial entities to explore opportunities for business transformation by making data and technology open, accessible, and location enabled. He's a frequent keynote speaker at industry conferences and events. So you can see I've got Andrew's LinkedIn there on the screen and also Paul's. So if you'd like to reach out to them and connect with them on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'd like to hand you over to Andrew and Paul for them to do their presentation.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks to George for inviting us along to this, and we thought we'd do something a little different. We don't have any presentations or anything like that. We just thought we'd have a chat, because you've seen lots of slide decks, and thanks to those bios, I must get those updated, because I'm not sure where that's from. That's from 10 years ago. I haven't done a triathlon since 2013. I still get fit, but
are you still playing AFL as well?
I gave that up probably 3 or 4 years ago. That's a bit more recent, but I've removed that from my bio now. But that's all right. We'll get those things updated. Andrew, is Andrew there?
I had a look. I didn't see him. It might just be you, Paul. Yeah, no, it doesn't look like he's online yet. You might want to.
Interesting. I chat to myself, maybe because he's on. Yeah.
And now you're.
Anyway, look, I'm happy to tap dance for a while. So, like Kelly said, Winyama is a pretty special business, and I'll just give you a bit of a background, and then when Andrew comes online, maybe you can answer some specific questions. But Andrew is a proud man from the Pilbara region, and so he's a traditional owner from the Pilbara region. And then, as his bio said, he's an anthropologist, and so he's into Indigenous heritage and working with elder groups around the country, collecting heritage information. And I believe he got into GIS and this field because it was a useful tool for him to engage with elder groups and traditional owner groups to collect that information. Because if you think about it, our traditional owners have been managing this land for 60,000 years, oldest culture on the planet. Maps has been a part of their heritage since way back, and it's in their stories, in their songlines. And if they're talking about, if you ever go and engage with a traditional owner, and you start talking about the land, the first thing he does, he'll clear the red dust and start drawing on there and talk about where things are and stories about things and where things moved and where some of their stories come from. So in a strange sense, I do believe they're the oldest cartographers on the planet, and I think we should celebrate that a bit more. But if you take it into the realm today, managing their heritage is an extremely important thing for them, and using some of these modern tools is extremely important to them. And Kelly says he's in the lobby. If you can just let him in.
He must be in the wrong lobby because he just comes straight in.
Okay, all right. I'm talking, so maybe is he communicating with you?
Send the invitation again.
Yeah. And so look, so that's how we got into this field, and I'll let him explain about Winyama and how Winyama came about. But he's had a very, very big week. As part of his business, he runs something called an Indigenous mapping workshop, which is something that started in Canada and then went to New Zealand, and he got tapped on the shoulder. Is targeted at ranger groups, traditional owner ranger groups, to help them come together and share stories about how they manage.
Keeps cutting out.
So part of it is about teaching GIS, but it's much broader than that. It's about data. It's about use of drones. It's about management of drone data. And through this education process, some of the things that are being talked about here in terms of having data standards and all that side of things, are starting to come to the fore. This is why this group's quite interesting. It's quite a mature group, and George has created quite a community around standards, around asset management, but very much in its infancy. But like the traditional owner groups, of which there's hundreds, are all grappling with the same thing now about how they manage their data and what standards will apply, so they can talk to their people they need to talk to, their stakeholder groups, but also talk with each other. And if there's standards, then maybe it's easier for them to share tools and have tools sitting on top of this. But the Indigenous Mapping Workshop was here last week. There was 100+ rangers here. There was ranger groups from Canada and New Zealand. We had NASA here, we had Google here, we had Amazon here, we had CSIRO here, we had Geoscience Australia here. We had it was quite the event. So that's why we thought this fireside chat, because I knew Andrew would be a little bit exhausted, and he probably would not want to be preparing any more presentations. So I thought let's just have a chat about his journey. So Kelly, is he there now? Because I saw him.
Well, I've sent him the link. I've sent him my phone number now. And I've tried to invite him in and call him from Teams. I'm not quite sure. For a tech guy. Yeah, but I was reading about that mapping workshop that they ran, that you were involved in last week. It looked really interesting. And where was it held? And now Paul's frozen.
Just
Right.
All these traditional owners all coming together, celebrating what they do and learning from each other. And it doesn't, look, everyone's got different politics, and I'm not going to talk about what side or anything, but with the voice, it's been an incredibly big year for our traditional owners, and so they had to come to terms with some of that, but the bravery of and the resilience of this network that I see, which just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, they're just getting on with it and managing the land amazingly, like they have for 60,000 years. We live in a beautiful country, and it's not beautiful by accident. It's because it's been looked after by our traditional owners. So, and they will continue to do that. And we're just trying to give them some tools and skills so that they can do it in the best possible way. We're providing them with the tools, not telling them what to do. We're providing them with the tools so they can apply it to themselves, but also by creating those networks, a bit like you've done here, by creating those networks, they can almost like call out to each other and help each other. One ranger group in the Kimberley can help another group in the Kimberley. It's a big place, but and you might be hours away, but you're still neighbours and you can help each other. And those relationships also, in terms of there might be things that are happening across a border, for example, like a fire or something like that. Just developing these relationships helps enormously with those sort of things. So this thing, it's an amazing thing to be part of. It's quite exhausting for Andrew and the volunteers, but so at the end of it, they're all pass out. But incredibly rewarding to be a part of. Is he there? No, I'm just gonna have to keep talking, aren't I?
He's gonna run it. So I have tried to get him on. I'll send him the invite.
I'll just say Kelly's sending you.
I've sent him the email with the link to join in it twice.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just start answering all these questions I had for Andrew. I might know some of the answers or something that I do. Yeah.
So
And
did someone have a question?
you can interview me, Kelly.
Well, I do want to interview you. So can you, I was looking around for research when I was looking at what the organisation does and how they work and stuff. And I think it's pretty amazing. And I was, when I was working for a spatial organisation, the organisation struggled to find Indigenous land surveyors and GIS professionals. And in fact, even just struggled to find companies that were Indigenous. And so when I looked around to try and see how many mapping organisations there are in Australia with that are Indigenous directors or Indigenous owned, and I actually couldn't find any data.
Yeah, and they still couldn't find any data when they did a diversity inclusion report in the spatial industry not long ago, and they, you know, that was a blank. So which I'm not sure why, because why didn't they?
Yeah, you keep cutting out, Paul, as well, but it looks like Andrew's joined us. Yay, welcome, Andrew.
Hello.
Paul's frozen, so that's why he looks like that.
Might make for a difficult interview.
Of our population. Hey, and I'm going to finish answering this on your behalf, Andrew. And so Andrew, it's a very mission-driven business, Winyama, and it was all about providing opportunities for Indigenous people, communities, and businesses to get into spatial and digital. You know, a bit broader than just spatial, but spatial and digital to enhance how they manage their operations or their land. And we saw lots of examples of where there's lots of people keen to involve, but putting a young Indigenous person into, let's say, a big mining company in the IT department. For a start, they're isolated. Second of all, it's not just about technical support; it's about cultural support as well. So there's cultural challenges, you know, and so Andrew just thought a better way to do this is, why don't we create a company which attracts a whole heap of Indigenous people to work in it? We'll train these people up and have them working out in these organisations, but they've got a home. And not only are they supported technically, they're supported culturally with their peers, and also they're part of something that's building and training lots of other traditional owners out there. Like the IMW has trained over 1,000 traditional owners out there over the last 5 years. It's quite incredible. So that was the thought, to just bridge that gap and provide a safe haven for people that want to get into this. Anyway, I should stop answering questions now, Kelly. Should I just revert back? How long have we got?
Yeah, you're good for the moment. Let's look at my agenda. You've got until 11:50, so you've still got 8 minutes. And I also wanted to mention that a couple of years ago, I did some work with RMIT and Maddy Yewers, who's one of our speakers. He's our speaker later on in the day, and we ran the Deadly Day of Science in partnership with RMIT, and we did a surveying as the science that we promoted and showcased. I think it was very successful. But anyway, I just wanted to say that RMIT are doing a bit of work around that. I'm not quite sure what the Deadly Day of Science is up to at the moment, though.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. I've explained how you got into GIS, and I've given you a bit of a background. But I suppose, just continuing on just quickly, the idea around Winyama, what was it for you in terms of your vision for creating this business?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew, obviously, and I'm a Nell. I'm a traditional owner, so I really like building the business. For me was really came through, I guess, some lived experience. After I finished university, went back to my community and started to work for my native title organisation, which is the Nala Aboriginal Corp. And it was really early days for the corporation, but it was doing like some really large land use agreements, so Indigenous land use agreements with Rio Tinto and a few other kind of rare earth miners, and there was a lot of kind of boardroom meetings with elders and representatives from different mining companies, and they always had these maps sort of laid out on the table, and there was a lot of pointing on sort of white sheets of paper with kind of lines all over them, and I could just see the elders struggling to convert their cartographic concepts that were needed to translate those maps, and so there's a lot of kind of nodding and kind of polite kind of discussion, but when the companies left the room, I would pull out Google Earth and pull the same data back into Google Earth, and bring our information, our cultural sites, our recordings of country into Google Earth, and just that visual representation. At that moment, under the sort of high pressure discussions, elders were actually engaged. They were really, speaking quite strongly about specific parts of country, and quite adamant about other bits that weren't allowed to be touched, or other bits that were okay. And I just, in that moment, I guess, just saw the power of good mapping, good visualization, diverse kind of discussions amongst data, and people's reflection on the need for translation across mapping concepts. And really, that was years ago, but that seed was planted in my mind that this was a thing, and it was powerful. It was powerful when you put it in the hands of traditional owners, and the communications and the efficiency of the kind of communications that went back to large corporates, was clear to me. And so really that was the journey that started up the idea of Winyama. And I trucked along for a while doing Indigenous heritage studies and a whole range of kind of mining engagements with Indigenous organisations as essentially a sole trader. And I just realised in order to make a larger impact, I needed a larger workforce. It couldn't just be me. And I came down to Perth and understood that I needed to find some partners and capability partners, as well as some financial backers to grow a business. Also, I'd never run a larger business, so it was really, I was looking for mentors and support, and really I was lucky, to be introduced, I think, to the NGIS guys and Paul in particular, to explain this story and to have someone who was I guess sympathetic to this idea that Indigenous people should be trained and should be invested in, and that that there is a business in this. I think that was the key component, that there is a successful consulting component to this niche. And I don't know if I hoodwinked Paul or I sweet talked him into the idea that this is in particular, something that we could make a business out of. And so, hence it took us a little while to build a company and to discuss this and strategize around how this would work. But what are we now, Paul? Like 5 years down the track, 6 years almost, going to the 6th year. I'm feeling, very confident about the. In fact, I think we were quite early in the move in terms of opening the Indigenous landscape, I guess, or the Indigenous mapping landscape up, and I feel like we've consolidated an amazing position across, a range of different types of organisations who are absolutely hungry and absolutely focused on their spatial capability, and building that, is kind of the mission that hasn't changed since that first day that I started to do that with my elders. So yeah, it's like Paul said, it's a passion project as well as my work, and it's an absolute privilege to be 6 years down the track and employing Indigenous people, and feeling quite like there's a bright future.
Just really quickly, dealing with this community here. I mean, we don't have long to go, but just this community here deals with a lot with data and data standards. Can you just talk about the sort of data that these traditional shaman groups are dealing with, and just some of the issues they've got with that data?
Yeah, so we are networking through our Indigenous mapping workshop about last week we had 102 Indigenous learners across the country who came to Curtin University for our mapping workshop, and the kind of rough split is Indigenous ranger groups, native title organisations, and it's sort of 40-60 in terms of probably 40% in rangers and 60% native title. And if you think about the percentage of land that native title industry manages, it's about 50% of the whole continent. It's a huge landmass, and inside of
so it's very similar to local government. Similar to local government, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge area. It's been growing over the last few years, and it's really peaking at the moment. I don't think there's there's a huge amount of other tenure out there, but this, the Indigenous orgs that we work with deal mainly in natural resource management data. So, lots of environmental monitoring, hydrological monitoring, a lot of feral species, both plants and animals. So there's a huge, in the ranger space, there's a lot of environmental monitoring data flowing through their organisations. In the native title space, it's obviously the basis is Indigenous heritage sites, but native title is also looked at as a bit of another form of tenure that needs to be managed from an Indigenous perspective. So there's definitely a conservation level thing, but I think a growing number of native title organisations are thinking right now about the development of their lands and the renewable sector as well as the rare earth sector. So there's a massive push for Indigenous organisations to really be spatially competent so that they can have a handle on the planning of different industries or different land use types on their lands, but the environmental monitoring component is obviously the other large section.
And so what's some of the challenges with data management, do you think, and what in the future as well?
I'd say there's a huge cultural shift happening right now. We've seen this over our Indigenous mapping workshop over the last few years, and I think the major shift has been Indigenous organisations wanting to manage data themselves and wanting to have a key insight into the data that is collected on their country, and that sounds quite simple, but you'd be very surprised to understand that there's very few native title organisations or very few ranger organisations that actually host and hold their own data on their own systems. There are a lot of partners, consultancies, research bodies that are working with these organizations, but either host or hold or create data on their behalf. And so our mission has been to make sure to wake up this sector a little bit, to understand that they need spatial systems of their own or good databasing structures to manage and to assert some form of control over the data that flows around them. In fact, sort of trying to get a sense that this is an economy that actually feeds, your organization and your community, and that feeds jobs and, jobs and as your organization builds its capability, it can begin to employ Indigenous people in the data economy. In terms of standards, there are very few Indigenous data standards for either of those types of those sectors. So there is no essentially accepted data model for a PBC, and similarly there is a burgeoning data model, I guess, for Indigenous ranger organisations, but they are very diverse across diverse landscapes, and their monitoring programs need to be quite bespoke down to specific types of vegetation or coastal or desert communities. But I think in the last Indigenous mapping workshop, we talked a lot about data models and data standards, and we run a program called Deadly Data, which is really just trying to explain to people what good data management looks like. And it was a really well attended and we had a great response from our attendees, because people haven't been schooled in that kind of discussion around clean data, and exchange of data from your organisation to others, and what standards you'd need for that, or what schemas fit best for what industry you're working in. So we are working really hard to think through data models for these two sectors. It's very broad, but working with one of the peak bodies in the National Native Title Council to think through data models for PBCs, as the native title organisation that holds title, but does a range of other a range of other pieces of work for their communities. So I would say very immature landscape at the moment, and a lot of hands needed to help this burgeoning sector create its data models for the future.
Very interesting. Thank you for that information.
Sorry, did I just dive in, Kelly? Yeah. I was going to say we're wrapping up now, so I know we've run a bit out of time, but
that's okay.
Hopefully that was useful, Kelly.
It was very useful, and I think I'll make sure that I connect you in with my Daily Day of Science people at RMIT as well, as that might be of interest to you, Andrew, Paul, to sort of see what they're doing around that space. So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew and Paul before we go to our next speaker? Been a very quiet forum, which is fine by me. So thank you very much, as I said, for logging on and talk to us about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And perhaps even there could be some further discussions with George in relation to standards around supporting you with that. I'm not sure. But anyway, thank you very much. And hopefully some people will reach out to you from this as well with your LinkedIn profile that was put up earlier.
Yeah. If anyone's got any questions at all, just reach out. I know some people could be shy, but just reach out on LinkedIn to myself, and I'll pass it on to Andrew for any queries. I can't answer it.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye. So thank you, everyone, for your patience. Andrew was running a little bit late, but that's okay. Our next speaker is Christian Fellinger, and Christian is from Spatial. And I'm just trying to share my screen again. There it is. I'll give you a quick background about Christian. Has worked in the global spatial industry for over 20 years across many sectors. including surveying, defence, oil, gas, infrastructure, mining and building construction. He spent the early part of his career in tech roles, focused on customer support, training and consulting services in the marine GIS sector. In 2006, Christian has worked in business development and sales with a demonstrated track record of selling and promoting industry-leading software and hardware solutions to the Australian market. And he joined Spatial in 2021 and took on the role of sales director in early 2023. So welcome, Christian.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction.
You're welcome. If you would like to share your screen, you can.
Perfect.
And we'll just be really conscious of time because we have Craig Sandy on at 12:20. He's got to bring his presentation forward a little bit. So
Yeah, perfect. I will try to be short and sharp and to the point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. Well, good afternoon. Well, almost good afternoon, everyone. Yep, thank you for the warm introduction. So I'm here just to present a bit of an update on our GDV Hub, our Geospatial Data Validation Hub platform. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So a bit of background, GDV Hub is a one-stop self-service portal for allowing developers, councils, utilities, and providers to submit and validate their GIS data against industry standards. Obviously, the one that's important here is the A-SPEC standard, and where appropriate, automatically apply logical corrections. So really focusing on this presentation, just really a high-level overview and some of our recent key enhancements that we've added in the platform. A bit on who we are at Spatial. So a bit of background, we're a global organization, about 30 years in the geospatial industry, I think 50 years as an organization, but within Spatial for about 30 years. Head office is in the UK, in Cambridge. We have offices in France, Belgium, the US. Here in Australia, we're a team of 16 staff strong. We serve the various markets on the right-hand side. Certainly government, utilities are key for us. Local government and utilities are key markets, and obviously that's a key sector for the A-SPEC community. We're also active in transport, natural resources, and AEC as well. And we're very partner-centric. We're a small organization, so have to work with a lot of different partners, including the ones you see on the left-hand side there. But we're most commonly known as an FME platform partner for, or platinum partner for Safe Software and FME in Australia, but we also develop our own software solutions for location master data management that we started to deploy here in Australia. And really the GDV Hub is an example of a platform developed using Spatial technology, and it's really designed for the Australian market. Bit of background about why GDV Hub is important. We heard in the last session with Paul and NGIS about data standards, data quality, and this is really a nice tie-in with that. It's about ensuring that data is fit for purpose. You have good quality data, and this is really of interest to, as I mentioned, developers, local governments, utilities, survey consultants, and other professionals working in land development and A-SPEC or asset management industries. So it really goes to the heart of data standards and specifically the A-SPEC specification. That's what we've addressed first. And really a better way to validate that information could be as constructed, as built information, and ultimately allowing asset owners to manage their assets effectively and efficiently. And really I'd like to highlight this as a collaboration with our partners, Digital Hive, who provided a lot of the expertise around the A-SPEC rules. We are not A-SPEC experts at Spatial. We provide the technology, but Digital Hive really worked in providing the domain expertise around A-SPEC standard. A bit of background, what is this challenge? So really, stakeholders within the industry, could be developers, local government, utilities, survey consultants who are providing the data to councils, need to lodge and design as constructed information to specifications. And really what we did is we took an approach of offering a new way to validate that information as a SaaS, or really validation as a service, using our Spatial technology. So the OneIntegrate, which is a rules engine that sits behind the scenes, and that's where all the A-SPEC complexity of the A-SPEC standard are included, and the One Data Gateway portal, which is the interface that clients work with when they're submitting and validating A-SPEC information and correcting that information. And really the key benefits to the community is really a web-based portal to lodge plans to logically correct A-SPEC to the A-SPEC requirements, so validate and correct that information. And this can really, we're focused on A-SPEC initially, but this can be expanded to other similar formats. I'm based in Brisbane, and when we deal a lot with ADAG data, so that's really next for us on the hit list as we build out the capability. Bit of a summary in terms of some of the capabilities around A-SPEC. So automatically being able to automatically correct A-SPEC data in a single process, could be correct as constructed and designed data, and then supporting for the legacy 2019 standard and now the current 2023 standard. So I'll talk about the 2023 standard more importantly in another slide. So in terms of the disciplines we support in 2019, that's for the D, R, and O, and in the 2023 is D, R, O, B, S, and W. And you can see the pinwheel on the right. What we've tried to provide is an inexpensive way to validate that information. I'll talk a little bit about the commercials in a future slide. Automated, easy to use, support for standard industry data format. So this is a very GIS-focused platform for validating A-SPEC information. Really, validation is a one-step process, but then the ability to logically correct data as well. And special shout out to A-SPEC. As I understand, this is the 20th year anniversary, or 20 years young for A-SPEC, so a bit of a shout out to a bit of a happy birthday cake as well. Some of the key features of the platform: it's cloud-based SaaS solution, so no software to install. We have enough software on our systems and computers. Logically apply logical corrections to A-SPEC standards. I'll talk what that means in another slide. Support for major spatial formats or GIS-focused formats: shapefile, MIF-MID, GeoPackage. From the user benefits and features, not really. You don't need expertise to lodge a submission, which is nice. So very, very minimal training. Support for previous and the current version. So as new versions of A-SPEC are released, we'll introduce support, but maintain support for older versions. Very friendly drag and drop interface. I won't be going to the details here on that, but some of you have already seen some of that. And I'll talk about some of the events we're hosting, which will allow you to get into more detail into the GDB Hub. Pay as you lodge in terms of some of the benefits. Rather than having to purchase software, pay annual maintenance, we've got a very flexible pay as you lodge module. So it's a membership fee, and then the more submissions you do, you pay per use essentially. No need to purchase software, install that. And we offer auto correction as a service as part of that. So validation and correction. And this idea of doing a schema mapping. So we're not forcing consultants to work in the A-SPEC schema. It's only at the point of lodging a submission where you can map your input data to the A-SPEC specifications as part of the submission process. In terms of some of the checks that we look for, so test for spatial relationships, so a multitude of spatial relationship checks that we've introduced into the platform. This is a common example, so test for correct swale relationship. So we can see that center line must be completely within the extents of the swale polygon feature, touching the endpoints. So we'll identify these features, but we don't actually modify the underlying geometry if we're applying the correction. So we'll validate it, but we'll make a conscious decision not to actually modify the geometry because we're not the custodians of the data. Even though that's possible within the One Spatial tools, we've chosen not to do that because we are not the custodians of the data. That's for the survey consultants to correct and fix. In terms of the logical corrections, correcting spelling mistakes, data type mistakes, and this ability to apply schema mapping. A couple of logical correction examples. So this is an example on the left-hand side where a user may submit data that's a consistent character length or attribute length, which is incorrect. And on the right-hand side, we see what the character length should be as per the A-SPEC specification, so we can automatically correct that information. This type of logical correction. Another type of example is uppercase, lowercase on the left-hand side. Submitting an attribute value is lowercase, but as per the A-SPEC specification, it needs to be uppercase. So that's another type of logical correction that we can automatically fix. So in terms of introducing efficiencies in the workflow is very important. Finally, a slide to summarize some of the key features and benefits, just reiterating some of the points. So cloud-based SaaS platform. As I mentioned, no need for lodging expertise from the user perspective. And this idea that it's a pay-as-you-lodge approach. And no need to purchase additional software, which is really nice. We all have enough software installed on our machines. A bit on the commercials on the platform. Very straightforward. We offer or charge an annual membership fee. So it's $500 per year plus GST, which provides support, technical support and some initial training for the designated individuals within an organization. So that's the minimum fee. And then users have the option of purchasing what we call a additional submission credit. So bulk credits receive substantial discounting. So you can see a bit, the more credits you purchase, then you get some discount based on how many credits you actually receive. And credits don't expire until they're consumed. In terms of a validation is 1 credit and a correction is 2 credits. So pretty straightforward and cost-effective model. So a submission, what we're talking about, could include multiple disciplines. So that could be DR and O, for example, and you supply that as a single zip file. And the idea, if you're using like an A-SPEC compliant software, ListTech or what have you, you should only need to do or perform a validation or a sanity check on the data, as the assumption is your output schema will match the A-SPEC schema. Anyone wanting more information on the platform, visit the webpage. There's a URL. You get more detail and register your interest in the platform. And on the bottom right are some of our customers that have subscribed to the GDV Hub. So there's a growing community, which is fantastic to see. And some of the recent key enhancements that I wanted to highlight, I won't go into too much detail, but really the first one being is now we have the GDV Hub running in OneSpatial, our own Australian Azure cloud tenancy. Why that's important is obviously from a performance point of view. It's much faster to lodge submissions to validate and correct the data, but also from a data security point of view. This ensures no supplied data leaves Australia. Nothing is going offshore. So from a data security point of view, it's critically massive improvement. And obviously now we can officially announce we have support for A-SPEC version 2023 within the platform, which is fantastic. It's been a lot of effort over the last couple of months to get that in, and we should have that deployed in our production environment soon. So just a quick screenshot from the GDV Hub interface, where you can see the assignment tiles, as we call them, and then you can see validation and correction tiles for the 2019 and the version 2023 as well. So I know a lot of our users have been waiting for that support. Now it's here, which is great. And I think my final slide. So if this sparked your interest a bit, people want to learn more, we're running a couple of hands-on GDV Hub in-person workshops. One up and coming in Melbourne next week, actually, on the 18th of September. I think it's at the Melbourne City College in the city. And then we're running another workshop later in the year in Perth for Perth customers there and potential customers on the 6th of November at the Engineers Australia. We did the last one there. These are free events to attend. And I want to highlight they included a complimentary lunch will be included at both events. So we had a couple people in last event not realize that, and they showed up full, but lunch will be provided, so don't need anything beforehand. And also GCA members who attend also receive 2 CPD points for taking part in the event. And then later in the year also we have our annual OneSpatial breakfast seminars taking place again, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and Perth. You can see that. And then great opportunity to learn more about the updates with OneSpatial and FME technology. And there's a link to our events page for more details on these events, which are, really look forward to those, GDV Hub workshops, hands-on practical use of the software. And that brings me to my last slide. So a quick overview of the platform, some key recent enhancements. I'm finished. So thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions from the group. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. That was a short, sharp, concise presentation, and everyone loves a free lunch. So please feel free to sign up for Christian's seminars that he's running, or forums. Thank you.
Thank you. And
if you have any questions, please just reach out to Christian directly via LinkedIn or through the chat. Moving along, we just catching up on a bit of time here. So our next speaker is Dr. Maddy Yewers. Now, I met Maddy some time ago when I was working with Surveying Task Force to promote STEM in schools, and also gender diversity in our spatial industry. And I thought it would be great if Maddy could come along and have a chat with us about what she's working on and what she's doing. But I'll give you a little bit about Maddy when I can make this screen so I can see it. The information about Maddy. Dr. Maddy Yewers has worked in the tertiary sector for over 15 years as a teacher, researcher, educator, program coordinator, and manager of student-facing as well as staff-focused work. She's a scientific PhD graduate and brings her research practices into the design, management, implementation, and evaluation of projects. She's led and established suites of STEM programs for high school, vocational education, university students, focusing not only on the creative and technical hands-on aspects, but also creating, connecting, and mentoring opportunities for further STEM communication, education, and careers. She is currently project managing RMIT's intersectional gender quality initiatives for students and the workforce across STEM areas, including Commonwealth Government supported project on national best practice for women in STEM, outreach and engagement. She enjoys her role is partnering with similar, what she likes most about her role is partnering with similar values-driven colleagues for meaningful partnerships and progress, work, community, industry, and the education sector. And so one of the things that I worked with Maddy on was to promote surveying to women or young girls in high school who were looking for careers in STEM, and that went really well. I thought, Maddy. Anyway, over to you, Maddy. If you'd like to, if you have any slides, feel free to share your screen. Is she here? I'm assuming she's here. She's not here yet. Well, that is great. So given that Maddy's not quite on board with us yet, I can open up for Christian for any questions, and I'll drop Maddy a quick Michael, do you want to have a chat with the group while I quickly follow up Maddy? Is that where she is? Or anyone would like to start a conversation? Okay. You're on there. So it'd be interesting to get some feedback on today's presentations. I've really enjoyed learning. Personally, I've really enjoyed all the presentations. Does anyone have any highlights from particular presentations that they want to talk about or discuss? Has it sparked any ideas that you may have? Has anyone worked with I've forgotten what it's called now, Winyama before? Or do they know of any other Indigenous organisations within the industry that they want to share information about? Great. Very good then. I would like to move over to the conversation I was having with Stephen before. I wonder if he's still on. He looks like he's jumped off.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, we're talking about usage of drones in surveying, and how that was becoming increasingly more popular as a quick way of capturing data and processing data. And you had some comments around that earlier. You thought that was quite interesting, and I thought you might like to share some of those comments.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I think ultimately that's the way data collection will probably be going soon. I mean, I'm not to say that we will get rid of surveyors, but for example, we've got a 12-kilometre shed path that's going between Inverloch and Wonthaggi. Now, to do a practical completion of that, or to send a surveyor down there, is to pick up the D-SPEC or A-SPEC or any A-SPEC stuff. It's 12 kilometres. That's a fair walk. And that's where I can see drones probably coming into their own. So you can go those long linear assets that get captured. I mean, obviously you can also combine that with a LiDAR camera, which would be really, really good. But yeah, look, it's one of those technologies that I think people are now just starting to realize that it's there. Yes, they are expensive to buy, these drones, and I think LiDAR cameras are quite expensive too, but you know, the more people that start to use it, the costs will come down. I think Gabby sort of mentioned the main problem is just the sheer volume of data that you can collect, and what do you do with all of that data? And where do you store it? Do you store it online? Do you store it in the cloud and all those sorts of things? But it's just opened up a whole new area for data collection.
Yeah, and I guess by creating all that data, then the whole idea around standards and making sure the data is within the standard so that it can be used and also used for that automation piece in terms of analysing the data as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's got to the stage these days where you don't need a degree to actually use that data, because the programs now are nearly plug and play, I suppose, and the options are available for you to process that data. Understanding that data is a different thing, but we use drones at the moment for a lot of our capital projects. We fly a drone over, and that's mainly for I was going to say propaganda, but publicity is probably the better word. But every now and again, if I can't remember what's happened, and some of my pictures that I take aren't, you know, I haven't taken enough, I will use the drone footage to have a look and just to refresh my memory and see if I've missed anything. So it is becoming available. We've got about 3 people at the moment that have a drone license, and I think there's a couple of others looking to get their drone license. So it's happening. I don't think it's happening slowly. It's happening quite fast, because as soon as people, not just people, but executives and managers realise the significance of it and what it can do, yeah, it's going to take. Because at the moment we get aerial photography once every year.
It's interesting.
And, you know, if you've got your own drone camera, I mean, obviously there's privacy laws and stuff like that. But any council-owned land or the road reserves, you know, you can fly up there and get either LiDAR or digital data. Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you very much. I have noticed that Craig Sandy has just logged in, and he's going to be talking to us today about some of the things that he's working on with the ICMS. Have I got that right, Craig? Probably not. So, Craig, if you wanted to take yourself off mute and turn your camera on, I'd be pleased for you to take over the screen and have a chat with the group about some of the things that you're doing.
Thanks, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig Sandy, Surveyor-General of Victoria, and currently Chair of the Intergovernmental Committee on Surveying and Mapping, ICSM. Because I think this group's focused on standards, that's where I was going to focus, and I'm hoping that it's not a dull session. What I'm going to show you is some of the key standard areas that we're working on. The ones that we consider to be the foundational ones, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So before we begin, I'll just acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting, and for me that's the Wurundjeri people here in Victoria. Pay my respects to their elders past and present. So just so you have an understanding of ICSM, so being an intergovernmental committee, we work across both Australia and New Zealand. So we have delegates from the Commonwealth Government, in addition to each of the state and territory jurisdictions, as well as our New Zealand colleagues. And you can see that we've been operating for in excess of 35 years. And predominantly we do the following activities. So we work closely with ANZLIC to deliver on the strategic plan and the updated roadmap. And the updated roadmap, for those that haven't been keeping across this, changed Australia's foundation spatial data framework from 10 themes to 14 themes to reflect the UN's global geospatial information management foundational spatial data themes. So we added 4 to adopt the same as the UN, and those 4, just in case you're wondering, were, I'll just see if I can find them here. So it was geology and soils, it is population density, physical infrastructure, and the last one is there somewhere, and I'm just failing to pick it up, but it relates to buildings and settlements. I knew it was there somewhere. So predominantly when the FSDF in Australia was created, which I'm sure many of you know, it was focused on what we considered the foundation themes. And then the UN's come along and said, well, we want some additional things that include the built environment. So we've added those. What does ICSM predominantly do? Well, we're there to support ANZLIC and to assist in the delivery of their initiatives. And we do that through 3 main objectives. One is by implementing appropriate standards in the protocols, and I'm going to talk about that one today. Coordination and collaboration of work across the jurisdictions to achieve shared and hopefully outcomes that are aligned, and to deliver projects of interest to all the jurisdictions to try and move as much as possible towards federated models and outcomes. So I'm going to begin with positioning, because from my perspective, positioning is the base of all geospatial information. So many of you would know that we moved from geocentric datum of Australia 1994 to 2020 a few years ago, and I've put up, for those that saw that campaign, one of the logos from that campaign, and there's a reason I've done that. And the reason is that despite it now being 2024, and in some jurisdictions such as Victoria, we actually implemented the regulations to change to 2020 in 2018, there are still many organisations who have not moved to GDA 2020. What is the impact on your information and systems? So in 2020, the move was around about 1.8 metres in your coordinates. So 4 years on, another 7 centimetres per year. So you're starting to be over 2 metres in error with your coordinates if you haven't converted them from GDA 94. The Geodesy Working Group, they monitor the modernisation of Australia's datums, and it's not just the horizontal datum, it's also the vertical datum. And so you can see in this slide, which is a slide to represent the modernisation, that Australia's height datum is included. Now, for those that may know, Australia's height datum was established in 1971, so it's now 53 years old. And there are some challenges that datum has. And so as some of us across the jurisdictions produce gravity model surveys, what we're actually finding is that we're actually able to determine where some of the distortions and the biases and the errors in AHD are, and therefore we're looking at what future datums in the height space might be produced. And so at this point in time, it's got a working title of Australia's Vertical Working Surface. And the benefit of that surface is that it is now independent of the existing height datum and can be operated from GNSS devices, global navigation satellite devices. And so ICSM and the working group are putting together discussion papers to consider the impact of changing Australia's height datum after it being in operation for so long, and how we transition to a height datum with less errors and distortions in it. In addition, we're also monitoring the movement of the horizontal datum as we now progress beyond GDA 2020, which was designed at the time to be something we moved towards. And now we're back to where we were with the previous datums, where we're now moving away from the representation of it. So that's in the height space, or in the datum space, sorry. The next area that's of interest to most, because when you're dealing with land and anything that we do predominantly is on land somewhere, everything is somewhere which requires land, or it's land covered by sea or water. We want to understand where we are, and we want to understand it accurately. And so in 2022, ICSM delivered this standard for how we capture and store cadastral information. And so you can see that it's weighted towards the highly densitized urban areas, and as you get further away from those areas, then the standard of accuracy that we expect with that data decreases, because there's less information available. It's generally much older, and therefore we can't give it as high a certainty as we want. So the key for this standard is that as we update our cadastral systems, and largely they're now digital, and we're starting to capture cadastral data digitally, we want to be able to put a positional uncertainty on each one of those nodes that are sitting in those data sets. And so these are the standards that we've put for there. And you can see, if you can read it, and I'm hoping that you can, that we've also put in the marine cadastre in there. And so you've got to deal with the marine cadastre a little differently. And so there's no specific accuracy for it. Where it abuts one of the other zones, then it should be at the level that zone is, and where it doesn't abut a zone, then it assumes the 5 meters for the pastoral remote areas. But overall, this is about ensuring that we have cadastral information that we can share with the professional users and any user in the community, so that they know the accuracy of the data that they might be receiving. So talking about bringing in cadastral data, so some of you may be aware that since about 2010, that ICSM created what was called an E-Plan working group at the time, designed, or the group was created to design a suitable exchange format for cadastral information. And at the time, a format called Land XML was utilised. And over time, it was realised that the various jurisdictions that were not all going to adopt this, and therefore it was not going to be an Australian standard. And so over the last 3 years, the Cadastre Working Group has focused on creating a new standard for exchanging cadastral survey data sets in Australia and New Zealand. And it's been a collaborative project with New Zealand as the project managers, and a number of the other jurisdictions participating, principally Victoria, Western Australia, and New South Wales, and a little bit from Queensland, and many of the others observing to see what's happening. So the project has been called the 3D Cadastral Survey Data Model, and it's to create an exchange to allow cadastral information to come from the profession into the land information agencies, or from the agencies out to the profession. So the first thing was to create a harmonised data model. So it began with a 2D representation of that. And then it was understanding the way that each of the jurisdictions use their cadastral data, and ensuring that we could profile for all the jurisdictions. The next part of it was to create the exchange format. And so it was about going through a process of determining which one was likely to be the best. If this was going to be a standard that could be implemented more broadly than Australia and New Zealand, what would be suitable? And more importantly, here in Australia and New Zealand, we're a much smaller jurisdiction than Europe or North America. And therefore, we needed to have an exchange format that could be or would be accepted by the major software providers who we rely on to produce much of this survey data. And so a decision was made to go with the JSON format. In diagram form, it looks a little bit like this. And so phase one was to create the 2D standard reference implementation. And then stage two was to do the implementation for the software providers. And so the project group has been out consulting with those providers. And you can see the note, it's not Land XML, to understand their willingness and ability to adopt this. And then the third one, and in that second phase, sorry, there was some planning around converting from the 2D reference implementation into some planning for the 3D. The last piece to this particular one was to create, as you can see in there, some jurisdiction user interfaces. So each jurisdiction will have a different implementation of this. So it's all come from the same standard, but they have slightly different implementations. And then the last phase, which is yet to begin, is to then extend this to 3D JSON so that we have the ability to not only capture the data in 3D, but to ensure that our internal systems are actually able to take in the 3D cadastral data and represent it in that 3D format, because at the moment most of them are 2D and can't be improved beyond that because of the platforms. So that's in the cadastral model, in the cadastral space. The last area that I'll talk about relates to geographic place names and street addressing. So the reason that I've put this up is that for the community, most people interact with street addressing. And over the last 10 to 20 years, street addressing has become significantly more complex. It's not possible to suggest that a single piece of land now has just a single street address or a single access point. That there are many and varied developments and land uses that have multiple access points. While the site may have a single address, that's not the way you access it. And so in the interest of our emergency response colleagues and the general user who just want to have services delivered to where they are, we need to consider our street addressing. And at the heart of a street address is a place name. And so the principles for consistent use of place naming are under revision. As many of you have probably come across, that there's a focus on Indigenous languages coming from the UN and ensuring that where possible, we put the original place name of the first people on geographic features. And so we need to revise it. Those principles were first written in 2009. And so 15 years on, they need to be revised to reflect the modern standards and the way that we're doing street addressing. So at the same time, the addressing working group was creating a new strategy with the same purpose, to modernise addressing. And I've put up there the Urban and Rural Street Address Standard, which you can see has a date of 2011. So it means that that standard is now over 10 years old and it needs a review. So the street addressing group came up with a strategy, and you can see the reasons why they came up with this strategy and the things that they need to do in a future model of addressing. to ensure that the community is served. And I've already mentioned the complex and multi-address representation, but it's considering alternative addressing systems or systems that might be able to augment into our existing street addressing. It's creating models of addressing that work across international providers. It's about validation of addressing points. And because we talked about the First Peoples language, it's about having an addressing system that can handle multilingual and alternate names and addresses. So all this work is designed to ensure that our community has the ability to move around and receive and get the services that they want, because we provide them with an underlying address that serves their current needs. The last slide I'll put up is some of the other work that ICSM is doing. So we're working in collaboration with a whole range of partners, led by Geospatial Council of Australia, to revisit a study that was produced by Asil Allen, and I'm trying to remember exactly when it was produced, but it would have been, from memory, probably in the early 2010s. But it's to understand the economic impact of geospatial services in Australia. Similar studies have been done overseas, and so we believed it was time to refresh that, given the more widespread use of geospatial data throughout our communities. And so we've been a contributor along with ANZLIC to that particular study, which is going to be released later this year, I believe. The last thing on this slide is that with standards that we've got to interact with the international organisations. And so here in Australia, ISO is got one of their plenary meetings. It's in November this year. So if you're interested in standards, and ICSM definitely is, then I would encourage you to consider attending this particular meeting in Sydney in November. And with that, I'd like to thank Kelly and the organisers of this event for the invitation to give me an opportunity to come and talk about the work of ICSM.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate you coming by. Does anyone have any questions for Craig before he jumps off? Very good. Thank you again, Craig, for coming along and presenting that information.
Not a problem. Happy to. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks. See ya. And so Maddy is here, and Maddy will, if you would like to unmute yourself and take over the screen share, you can present your presentation, please.
I'd love to. Thank you, Kelly. Just finding the one. Here we go. And great to be here. And I think I certainly recognise Craig, but I think Ross too. I see Ross's name in the attendees, so it's nice to see you again, Ross. Yes, so my name's Dr. Maddy Yewers. I work at RMIT. I'm coming to you from Swanston Street in the city on the lands of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge ancestors and elders past, present. What I do at RMIT is I work in diversity in STEM. So I project manage a few different things, and what I wanted to talk to you about today is how we showcase education and career options, and we increase representation of diverse people in STEM. So first I wanted to just paint a little bit of a picture, in particular around gender. So what we see is that there's a growing requirement for future workers in STEM, in technology being one of those, so science, technology, engineering and maths. And what we see is this growing requirement is limited by the underrepresentation of Australia's diverse populations. And women in STEM in particular are underrepresented starting in school and continuing across primary, secondary, tertiary education and into careers. We see the greatest inequities in surveying, engineering, IT, and I've got here some info about what this looks like currently. we look at high school aspirations for a STEM career, they're double for men compared to women. We look at who's studying STEM subjects at school. We see, big inequalities there between women and men. Tertiary graduates in engineering and technology, again, what is that fourfold difference there, looking at men and women. And I've also included here current enrolments, well, actually last year enrolments in RMIT's bachelor program for surveying, which had 4.3% women. Why is this important? Well, diverse skill sets and mindsets, they lead to different solutions, don't they? And more inclusive outcomes. So this then allows the best possible products and solutions for all. What we have a big focus on is we have a focus on access, we have a focus on retention, we have a focus on graduate outcomes. But what I wanted to focus on today with you is promoting diverse participation in STEM through working with schools. And what we do is we form strong partnerships with schools, and we do this for early exposure to different areas of STEM. We work with these school partners multiple times for consolidated learning. We build relationships that matter within the school and external to the school for long-term change. And we apply practical hands-on learning approaches to showcase the STEM, including the opportunity to meet relatable role models, who I'll go into a little bit later, and connecting industry, university and schools as the natural intermediate between those different education and career pathways. Each year we reach over 2,500 students. And we do this through a variety of programs, which I'll go through shortly. And our priorities are really years 5 to 10. So in that time, we see a period of discovery, of selection of subjects, of kind of people finding their fit, what works for them. And all of our programs have a really strong embedded evaluation. We look at things like interests, confidence, aspirations. And with our partnership model, so we're not working with lots and lots of different schools, we're working with strong partners. We can then look at changes over time within the school and then looking at enrolments at RMIT later on. Those relatable role models are our student ambassadors who are currently studying STEM subjects, and they inspire and connect with school students. And they also develop their own personal and professional skill sets too. And the groups that we work with and prioritise are women, gender diverse, low socioeconomic cohorts, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and a big focus too on regional and remote communities. And this is to increase education and career opportunities, the role model connection and mentors, both in tertiary ed, vocational and university, as well as industry. Increasing excitement and confidence through these hands-on and real-world applications. And, participation is to address these predicted STEM skill and realised STEM skill shortages and align to RMIT's strong commitment for equity and diversity. We aim to break down stereotypes, inspire STEM participation, empower, build confidence and knowledge, connect to industry and RMIT student mentors as well, boost positive STEM cultures in schools through the partnership model, and provide hands-on learning and real-life experiences, which we've done fabulously with surveying. And I know Ross was involved with that, as Kelly was too, as we developed different workshops and models there. Our programs include a program called Future STEM Leaders, which is based on international best practice, and that's looking at leadership of young women in our partnership schools. So year 9 and 10 young women are trained up to be leaders and to deliver workshops for students in younger year levels of all genders. InterScience is a STEM peer mentoring program, so RMIT students mentor students in high school. We have the Deadly Day of STEM with Indigenous focus and engagement. Regional engagement each year. We also have some regional and Indigenous joint engagement through those different programs. We have residential camps and we provide sponsorship for those. One of those is called Science Experience. And then we have a variety of partnership programs, which is listed here. So the Victorian Indigenous Engineering Winter School, Mathematical Association of Victoria, Big Day In and Spark Engineering. And I know there's a few surveyors here, so I thought I'd just highlight one of these quotes in particular. Surveying was surprisingly more interesting than I thought. The machines and technology were really fun to learn about and use. That was through our Future STEM Leaders program. The student ambassadors are current RMIT students from underrepresented backgrounds in STEM, and they're really central to our program as those relatable STEM role models who are closer in age. Yeah, I'm too old. We need the younger ones involved to promote and to look at those exact next steps for our school students. And we upskill and empower our RMIT students to be ambassadors through training, through community and connection. And we've seen amazing results from that for the ambassadors themselves, both in terms of their experience, their retention, and their connection with others. For meaningful change, we value and actively engage in external partnerships. This is not about RMIT. This is about how can we make change, lasting change across the sector. So we have partnerships in tertiary, and we have a national project that we're running with UTS and University of Adelaide, which is federally funded. And we partner with industry, particularly looking at mentors, those role models, designing workshops as we have for surveying, establishing scholarships and looking at access programs. We partner with community, again, for that collaboration and access to tertiary programs. And we partner with education in general, schools and peak bodies through co-design, collaboration and access mechanisms. So I just wanted to share here at the end that there are ways to get involved, and this is, as I mentioned, about working together for that lasting change, looking across the STEM sector. What can we do? How can we address this skills shortage, and how can we promote opportunities for diverse participation in STEM? And there's ways to do that through showcasing different careers, through role models, personal stories and connection, and those co-design of the activities. Supporting traditionally underrepresented groups to access STEM through things like scholarships and career pathways, and connections with local school communities to strengthen those partnership models and to look, really at that local level to create the change and sustained differences there. So that's all from me, Kelly. I just popped my details up there, but thanks so much for the opportunity to come and meet with the group today. And I hope, that's been of interest and kind of highlights a little bit of what we do. Back to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddy. And it is very interesting to see those figures coming out from your research and from what you know. I know the Surveying Task Force has done a lot of work in trying to promote surveying and spatial careers to students, and in particular have worked with your area of expertise to promote to women in STEM as well. So if you'd like to assist with that promotion of our careers, then please reach out to Maddy or the Surveying Task Force, and all support we can get is great. We're grateful for. So thank you very much, Maddy. Really appreciate you coming on.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Good presentations.
Oh, thanks. And thanks, Stephen, for assisting with a couple of things. It was really appreciated.
No worries. Enjoy.
Thank you. You too.